Christian Justino Santos, aka Cyborg. Man, throughout my whole life as a fan of combat sports, this woman is probably the only one that has made it very, very difficult for me to love. Now, granted, I acknowledge her accomplishments, and I agree that she is legend in MMA. Just combat sports in general, since she's touching boxing now. I'm not gonna take that away from her. Arguably top 1 or 2 best female fighters to ever live. Absolutely. But my history with her extends to the Strikeforce days, to the Elite XC days. I have DVDs with her on it. And I've always been impressed, of course, by her. But around her Strikeforce days, she started hitting some bumps in the road. Right? Failed drug tests for performance enhancing drugs. You guys can look up all these specifics, okay? Couple to several times throughout her career. And of course, there's always an excuse or a reason as to why it just happened to be in her system and she wasn't aware of it. Still, she made it to the UFC because of demand. Just in general, like I mentioned, if you talk about women's MMA, anything that has to do with women's MMA, Cyborg is the top dog. So of course she made it to the UFC, had a few fights, got her championship at 145 pounds. But then, just then, even more reason for me to dislike her. Around that time when she was champ, there was another female who was coming up, Amanda Nunes, the Lioness. And there was always a reason or an excuse from Cyborg as to why Amanda Nunes doesn't deserve the title shot. Amanda Nunes, normally being at 135 pounds, would be the one stepping up to 145s to challenge Cyborg for her belt. But Cyborg would say things along the lines, she's coming up from a lower weight class, almost insinuating, who does she think she is? Thinking she can come up to a weight class and expecting a title shot right off the bat. She has to wait her turn or get some fights in and earn her spot as a title challenger. And around this time on Twitter, I was very heavy on this, tagging Chris Cyborg on her Twitter handle, that I thought she was afraid. And she said she would respond back, her or her management team, regardless of who it was. It was the official Twitter handle, Twitter page, Twitter profile of Cyborg. And at first it shocked me that they would even be responding to people like me. And it wasn't just me, it was several people. Where she would say, it's because Amanda Nunes is not a draw. She's a 135 pounder. She's too little. She hasn't earned her spot. And maybe a couple of other ones. I can't quite remember. But she would be responding, or the page would be responding to me. And I remember clearly I mentioned, so who do you think is up for your belt then at 145s? And Cyborg's Twitter replied by saying, Cindy Dandois. For those that don't know Cindy Dandois, she's also a 135 pounder, same as Amanda Nunes. So I guess the whole she's too little only applies to Amanda, but not Cindy Dandois, who actually has fought at 125s. Cindy Dandois was never a draw, or at least I can assure you guys, not bigger than Amanda Nunes. I mean, maybe now she is with her OnlyFans. But these hypocritical reasons as to, well, this person deserves it, but Amanda, she doesn't deserve it. It seems like all these things only apply towards Amanda as to why she wasn't interested in that fight. I think we all knew that she knew Amanda Nunes was a very, very dangerous fight to her throne. Which, we all know how that happened. In about a minute, Amanda Nunes knocks out Chris Cyborg when they do eventually meet to fight. Nunes wins by devastating fashion, proving me right. But anywho, Cyborg, shortly after us going back and forth on Twitter, blocked me. That was a personal account of mine. And then eventually I started the Art of Fight trolling. And it just seems by then Cyborg was already in Bellator. And there's another rival on the rise towards Cyborg's championships. And her name is Kayla Harrison. Kayla Harrison is from the PFL. Okay. Cyborg ended up in the PFL, I'm sorry, not the PFL, but Bellator, due to the fact that she was very difficult. According to Dana White, she was very difficult to work with. Now, granted, a lot of fighters are. But Cyborg had released a video that really put the nails on her coffin to her UFC career, which is the biggest, most prestigious MMA organization out there. She made a very damning, false, edited video where it made Dana White seem as if he's belittling Cyborg, that he's saying this and that, and Cyborg would say, hey, what kind of promoter does this or says this about their current champion? They don't like me. It seems like Cyborg was trying to create a story or a narrative of her own of why she's going to leave the UFC after losing her belt. Granted, it was a scandal, which you guys can also look it up, where Dana White came out and said, hey, those videos of the things that I said about Cyborg, those are heavily edited. And sure enough, it's the internet. I don't know how Cyborg or her team thought that they were going to get away with editing and making it seem as if Dana White is belittling one of his biggest stars. So after people dismantled this video and her victimization, she quickly apologizes because she knows that the door's gonna close forever. She tries to apologize and blames it on her team, that she has an editing team who takes care of all that stuff. She has nothing to do with it. But it was too late. As Dana White said, quote and unquote, we are out of the Cyborg business. And that's how she ended up with other options as such as Bellator, which are a competitor organization of mixed martial arts. There's also PFL, there's Risen. There's still several options for her to be successful in life with her career in combat sports. She goes with Bellator, becomes the champion there. We were all expecting that, by the way. But during this time in the PFL, Kayla Harrison is rising. And for a couple years, you know, it's almost like if there's a gate and there's two dogs just staring at each other the whole time, knowing that they're each other's biggest rivals. And it's cooking. I mean, people are catching wind to this. They want to see Kayla Harrison versus Christiane Cyborg. And of course, towards the end of last year, 2023, PFL had a pay-per-view where Kayla Harrison competed. She was the champion, got dethroned by another female athlete named Larissa Pacheco. So on this pay-per-view towards the end of the year, Kayla Harrison fights a UFC veteran, and she wins very decisively, very dominant, and without saying her name, calls out Chris Cyborg. Around this very same time, there was an announcement that finally Bellator was acquired by the PFL. So we all immediately started salivating at the thought, finally we're gonna get Cyborg versus Kayla Harrison. Another matchup that Cyborg finds herself exactly in. All over again. The way we eventually were hoping for this massive super fight between Nunez and Cyborg. Now it's Kayla Harrison and Cyborg. Surprisingly though, after this call out, Cyborg posts a promotional video where she's just, someone hands her a phone and she's watching the Kayla Harrison call out. And when it's all said and done, she slowly puts the phone down and just kind of walks away from the table, insinuating she's not interested in this fight. And then the interviews come out where she was not invited to this pay-per-view, which was a form of a celebration of the two companies coming together, and that she does not wish to work for a promoter that has disrespected her. You see where we're going with this all over again? That they didn't invite her to the event. And it's kind of a, again, this is verbatim now. She pretty much was hinting that this is a telltale of things to come. So she's pretty much making it seem like PFL is very unprofessional, and why would she want to go work for an organization that's unprofessional and that does not value her? Is this kind of ringing a bell with anybody with Cyborg now? That when she actually has stiff competition coming her way, she tends to victimize herself as to why these companies do not value her and she shouldn't be fighting for them. An insane cycle of victimization by Cyborg. Now granted, I believe Cyborg is very interested in joining the PFL now, and Kayla Harrison has left the PFL and signed with the UFC. So now we're stuck again in this complicated contract negotiations that are going to prevent a super fight from happening. PFL's CEO Peter Murray came out and kind of stood up for Cyborg, like, hey, well, Kayla Harrison's the one that didn't want to make the fight happen. But he only said it once Kayla Harrison signed with the UFC. And after she signed with the UFC, now Cyborg is interested with coming into the PFL. And now the CEO of PFL is saying, hey, well, it wasn't Chris Cyborg's fault. It was Kayla Harrison that didn't want to make this fight happen. You see where I'm going with this? Now granted, all this has left a very bad taste in my mouth for Cyborg. It's hard to become a fan of hers. Although she is exciting, her fights are exciting. The woman is an absolute joy to watch compete. Now, January 19th of this year, 2024, Temecula, California. Pachanga Casino. I had the pleasure to take my brother, my nephew, and my son to go watch Cyborg box. And the event was great. I mean, for what it was great. We were even able to take pictures with Cyborg because she was very humble. And this is where it's difficult for me because I've never seen this before. The fans were crying out for her. They were in tears of joy. Cyborg means so much to the MMA and boxing community, just the combat sports community in general. And let me tell you guys something. Despite of everything I've said about Cyborg, she was so good to us, the fans, that night. There was security kicking us out fairly early. No pictures, everybody shoo. Already kind of, shooing us away. And Cyborg kept embracing her fans walking forward. Like, no, photo, come on. Just absolutely a sweetheart. A woman for the fans. A woman of the fans. The people's champion. That's what you're supposed to do. And I appreciated that so much because I've never seen this before. And let me tell you, I've been to several events, okay? Not everybody fights to keep their fans around, to take pictures and just hear them out about how much she means to them and that they're happy they saw her. And it seemed genuine, man. It seemed completely genuine. Cyborg is an absolute, she loves her fans. Cyborg loves her fans, man. I saw it firsthand. That's why to me Cyborg is a complicated case, because this whole time for about 10 years, back and forth, getting blocked, just not agreeing with her ways of negotiate, or ways of promoting and negotiating, and always acting like the victim. And then I finally see her live, I see her compete, and she was so good to all of us.